lesson is over orders of operations, which is also known as PEMDAS, or some of you may call it Please Excuse My Dear Aunt Sally. Going to go over a couple of key things before that. The E in PEMDAS stands for exponent, and exponents, remember, is to multiply a number times itself, that base number times itself, the number of times that it shows up inside of that exponent. So for example, this 3 to the 5th power would be 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, not just 3 times 5. Some key terms to remember is evaluate. Evaluate means to assign a value for a number. So you're changing that expression into one numerical value there at the end. It's just a fancy word for solve. To evaluate an expression means to find its value or solve. The first example today says to evaluate 3 to the 5th power. So 3 to the 5th power, you can just put it inside your calculator using that 3 and then the little up arrow key that looks like this, and putting 5 as that exponent. And when you do, you get 243, because you have taken the number 3 and multiplied it times itself 5 times. Very different than 3 times 5 is 15. The rule that lets you know which operation to perform first is called orders of operations. You've learned this as PEMDAS. There's the catchy little saying, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Those are both used here. Here are the rules. Number 1 says to treat P, use parentheses, treat anything inside of parentheses as its own problem first. That's the first thing you solve. Next, you move on to evaluating exponents, and you get rid of all the powers. And then MD, multiply and divide, go in together. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to do all the multiplication first before you go to the division. That's not how it works every time. What it is multiplying and dividing are together, and you solve them from left to right. After you get all the multiplication and division done, you should be just left with addition and subtraction, and you will do the same as they appear from left to right. Reminder, adding does not necessarily mean it has to be done first. It all depends on the order in which it is written. That is very important for multiply and divide and adding and subtracting. We had a key concept box here. Just read words. PEMDAS, saying step 1 is to evaluate anything inside of grouping symbols. Step 2 is to evaluate all the powers. Step 3 is to multiply and or divide from left to right. And step 4 is to add or subtract from left to right. The way that I like to work these out is to underline the part of the problem that you're going to evaluate first. That way we know this is what I'm doing. Everything else just falls down into place with it. And then you can work it out, and your whole answer should start out big and work down in a triangular pattern. So here's some examples. I have 16 minus 8 divided by 2 to the power of 2 plus 14. Using PEMDAS, I look for parentheses. There are none. So I move to the next step. Exponents. I see an exponent here, so I'm going to underline it. That tells me that's what I'm going to solve first, and everything that is not underlined just comes straight down. So I still have my 16, I still have my minus 8, I still have my division symbol, and then I evaluate 2 squared. 2 to the 2nd power is 4, and then I still have that plus 14. Everything that was not underlined just came straight back down. Parentheses, there are none. Exponents, there are none. So please excuse. Now we're on to multiply and divide, MD. I don't see any multiplication. There is division here. So I'm going to underline that first. Bringing everything else down, I'm going to bring this 16 down. I'm going to bring this subtraction sign down. 8 divided by 4 is 2. And I'm going to bring this plus 14 down. PEMDAS, there's no parentheses, there's no exponents, there's no multiplication or division. We're left with just addition and subtraction. I need to do those in order from left to right as they appear, not necessarily doing addition first. Even though this is here, I'm going to subtract first because it is what happens from left to right. Addition and subtraction live on the same level. So I'm going to do the 16 minus 2 first, and that gives me 14. I bring down the rest of my problem plus 14, and then 14 plus 14 is 28. You are more than welcome to plug this into your calculator exactly as it looks up here to make sure that this is your final answer. However, the work leading up to the problem is just as important as the problem, and I will need to see each of these steps worked out for you to get credit. Moving on to our next example. I have 20 minus 7 plus 8 squared minus 7 times 11. Parentheses, there are none. E, exponents, 8 squared. I'm going to copy everything else down. 20 minus 7 plus 8 squared is 64. Do not simply do 8 times 2. 8 squared is 8 times 8, which is 64. Minus 7 times 11. Everything else just drops straight back down. PEMDAS, I'm going to go ahead and write that PEMDAS up here to kind of help me keep track. There's no parentheses. There's no exponents. Now I'm looking for multiplication or division, and I find multiplication here at the end. Everything else just drops straight down. 20 minus 7 plus 64 minus 7 times 11 is 77. Parentheses, no. Exponents, no. Multiplication and divide, no. So I'm down to addition and subtraction. Starting from left to right, I have 20 minus 7. That's what I'm going to do first. 20 minus 7 is 13. Bring everything else down. Plus 64 minus 77. Starting from left to right, 13 plus 64 is 77. So I have 77 minus 77, and my answer is 0. Once again, you can plug this into your calculator to make sure that it yields 0, but you need to have each step worked out in order appropriately on your work. Once again, a reminder, my problem starts out big. It should work itself down in that triangular pattern. Moving on to the back side of your notes. A few more examples. I have 4 divided by 2 plus 5, parentheses, 10 minus 6. Copy down PEMDAS. Look for parentheses. Here they are. Underline it because that's what I'm doing first. Everything else just comes straight down. So I copy 4 divided by 2 plus 5, parentheses. 10 minus 6 is 4. Close my parentheses. This parentheses now represents multiplication. Okay? There's no work to do inside of those parentheses, so it's just representing multiplication. So I don't have any parentheses that need work inside of them. I don't have any more exponents. Now I'm doing multiplying and dividing. However, I need to do it in order from left to right. So what I'm going to do first is this 4 divided by 2. So I underline it. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And then bring everything else down. We're still on the multiply and divide stage. I still have some multiplication that needs to be done. So bring down my 2. 2 plus 5 times 4 is 20. 2 plus 20 is 22. My final answer. The P parentheses stands for any type of grouping symbols. Those must be done first and treated like it's its own problem entirely until you are done. So this problem has brackets and parentheses. The first thing I need to concern myself with is inside of this bracket, treat this section like it is its own problem. So the multiplying of the 6 will be the very last thing that I do. So by orders of operation, parentheses tells me that this is what I need to worry about first. And then inside of that problem, using parentheses, it tells me that this is what needs to happen first. Everything else comes straight down. So I have my 6. I have my open bracket. I still have a 32 minus, and then inside parentheses 2 plus 3 is 5. I have that raised to the power of 2, and then I'm going to close my brackets. So everything looks the same. The only thing that I have done is I turned this 2 plus 3 here into the 5. Other than that, everything looks exactly the same. Okay? Continuing on, inside of these grouping symbols, I have to treat it like it's its own problem. So I have 32 minus 5 squared. Well, 5 squared is what I need to do next because that's an exponent. So I have 6 bracket 32 minus 5 squared is the same thing as 5 times 5, so that's 25. And then I can close my bracket. I need to do what's inside of grouping symbols first. So I have my 6. It comes straight down. 32 minus 25 is 7. And now I just have a multiplication problem of 6 times 7 is 42. When you're putting something like this into your calculator, you can use as many sets of brackets as you'd like. So this will be a bracket, this will be a bracket, or parentheses. Just make sure that you close them appropriately. Make sure everything is grouped together and it looks just like it looks here. Okay. Moving on, we're talking about infractions. I know it doesn't look like this is a fraction. The computer was reading it as an error. So in class today, remember we came in and drew a fraction bar right in here. In fractions, it's important to make sure that you keep your numerator and your denominator as 2 individual problems, and then you combine them with division there at the end. That fraction bar represents division. For this example, my numerator was 2 to the 3rd power minus 5, and my denominator was 15 plus 9. Here in this top problem, 2 to the 3rd power minus 5, 2 to the 3rd power is what I'm doing first. So 2 to the 3rd power is 8 because it's the same thing as 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8 minus 5 all over 15 plus 9. I have addition and subtraction only. I'm treating them like they're their own problems anyways. 8 minus 5 is 3 and 15